Hello and welcome to my first History Lounge episode. My name is Kevin and today we're covering the extraordinary life of Alexander the Great. Before we can talk about Alexander III of Macedon, it is important to talk about his parents, especially his father, Philip II of Macedon. Philip was born in Pella, Macedon, which was considered part of Greece then, at least by the Macedonians. This is difficult and controversial, but I'll just say Macedonians or Alexander's army for the sake of simplicity in the rest of the video. Philip spent time as a hostage in Thebes, where he got a military and diplomatic education from Epaminondas, a great Theban general and statesman. Philip became king of Macedon 6 years later and embarked on military reforms so that his expansionist vision for Macedon could be achieved. Such reforms included the introduction of the sarissa, which is a spear bigger than a YouTuber's ego. Yes, it's that big. And promoting people based on merit, along with many other tactical advancements which made his army very formidable. Not only was Philip fantastic at reforming the army, he was also a great general, which he proved during the Third Sacred War, in which he first conquered all of northern Greece before pushing south, culminating in the narrow Macedonian victory over Thebes and Athens at the Battle of Chaeronea. This resulted in his complete control over Greece, aside from Sparta, who Philip sent a message saying, "If I win this war, you will be slaves forever," advising them to submit to him or else. The Spartans' one-word reply was, "if," which really shows how witty and confident they were. Philip didn't end up invading Sparta because Sparta itself was very mountainous and the Spartans would have put up a huge fight for their land, so it was seen as too much of a hassle, although they were not strong enough to pose any sort of threat to Philip, at the time anyway, so they could just be left in isolation. Philip then consolidated his power and started making plans for his invasion of the Persian Empire in order to liberate Greeks living in Asia Minor. However, he wouldn't live to see this happen as he was assassinated before it could be undertaken. This leads to Alexander's mother, Olympias, who can only be described as very interesting, as she was obsessed with snakes, was apparently a part of a religious cult, and constantly told young Alexander that he was actually the son of Zeus. Olympias and Alexander had a very close relationship, which may have been because of Philip's mistreatment towards her and jealousy over Philip's other wives, which always made Philip suspicious of his son since he thought Alexander was just a tool for her ambitions. Speaking of Alexander, we should get back to him. Alexander was also born in Pella and received a great education under Aristotle alongside his friends and future generals Ptolemy, Hephaestion, and Cassander. Alexander also learned about military tactics from Philip and participated in the Battle of Chaeronea at the age of 18. He also learned about Persian tactics and culture from Persian exiles, which aided him when he launched his invasion of the Persian Empire. On a side note, when Alexander was 10 years old, a trader brought a scared horse for sale. Philip ordered it away as it couldn't be mounted, but young Alexander noticed that it was only afraid of its own shadow, eventually managing to tame the horse and naming it Bucephalus. This greatly impressed Philip, who declared, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you." So how and why did Philip get assassinated? It's difficult to say as modern historians disagree on the why, but we do know it was during a marriage celebration of his daughter and was committed by Pausanias, who was one of his 7 bodyguards, who stabbed Philip then tried to escape but was killed by 3 of the other bodyguards. Reasons for this include Pausanias being raped by Attalus, who was a commander in Philip's army. He then complained to Philip, who dismissed the issue as he didn't want to chastise Attalus, and so Pausanias killed him for not avenging his honor. Other reasons include a plot by Olympias to eliminate Philip in order to get Alexander on the throne. This is quite possible as Alexander quickly consolidated his power by eliminating political rivals such as his cousin and 2 Macedonian princes and ordering the execution of Attalus, while Antipater, one of Philip's generals, immediately marched his army to Alexander to support him. Olympias had Philip's other wife Eurydice and her infant son burned alive, which infuriated Alexander and caused Alexander to try and keep Olympias from politics for the rest of her life. Philip's death also caused many states in Greece to revolt, which Alexander quickly put down, including the total destruction of Thebes, as well as securing his northern border before he could turn his attention to Persia, who he blamed for the death of Philip. Alexander left Antipater, his great friend, as regent. Antipater supported Alexander throughout his conquest by sending reinforcements and suppressing revolt within Greece, including an invasion by Sparta, which he utterly destroyed at the Battle of Megalopolis. Alexander greatly benefited from Philip's preparations to invade the Persian Empire, crossing the Hellespont with 48,100 soldiers, 6,100 cavalry, and a fleet of 120 ships drawn from all the Greek states, although this number paled in comparison to the size of the Persian armies he would soon face. These preparations meant that Alexander had huge initial success, winning the Battle of Granicus against the local Persian forces and liberating Greek cities along the Ionian coast, before facing the Persian king Darius' army at the Battle of Issus, who surprised Alexander by advancing behind him, leading to an enormous battle at the town of Issus. Alexander was massively outnumbered, with most modern sources saying he faced an army twice or even 3 times the size of his. However, Alexander was a master tactician, and he had fantastic generals. He also greatly inspired his men by fighting alongside them and pulled out a great victory. King Darius made the monumental mistake of bringing his wife and daughters and even his mother with him to the battle, which resulted in all of them being captured while Darius escaped as his army disintegrated. Alexander treated all of the women with great respect and ended up marrying one of the daughters later on. Alexander's destruction of the Persian Empire continued down the coast, resulting in the siege of Tyre, which was necessary to protect his supply lines but took 8 months due to it being an island, resulting in one of the few cases of Alexander ordering the looting, murder, and enslaving of the entire city, which he also did in Gaza after receiving a serious shoulder wound during another siege. By the time he reached Egypt, his reputation plus the Egyptians' disdain for Persian rule meant that no fighting was necessary, and he was crowned Pharaoh of Egypt without a fight and regarded as a liberator, famously founding Alexandria by Egypt at the end of the Nile. After taking a bit of a breather and rejecting any truces from King Darius, Alexander decided it was time to finish off the Persian Empire. He marched deep into Persia, resulting in another enormous battle at Gaugamela, in which he was once again outnumbered 2-1, but pulled out another tremendous victory even after oversleeping that morning, causing King Darius to flee once again. This was the end for the Persian Empire as Alexander marched into Babylon. He went on to easily capture more Persian cities before taking a 5-month break in Persepolis, in which a fire broke out which destroyed most of the city. The money captured from the Persian treasuries that was sent home resulted in a huge economic boom, although Alexander's constant need for more troops did cause a manpower shortage, and migration of Greek people throughout Alexander's new empire also added to this. Alexander's next goal was to capture Darius to show that he was the one true ruler, and he set out after him only to eventually find him dead at the hands of Bessus, his Bactrian governor, which angered Alexander, who declared Bessus a usurper. He buried Darius next to his ancestors in the royal tombs and set off after Bessus. This resulted in his conquest of the formerly Eastern Persian Empire, in which he named many more cities after himself, and even one after his horse, before Bessus was betrayed and given to Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, where he was executed. As Alexander continued east, he started to meet resistance from some of his men, including some of his generals, many of whom hadn't seen home in years, but also because Alexander had adopted Persian dress and customs, the most upsetting of which was kissing him on the hand, which he later stopped because it caused so many issues. However, a plot to kill him was soon revealed, and Alexander executed Philotas for failing to alert him to the plot, which necessitated Alexander to also execute his father Parmenion to avoid any attempts at vengeance. He also killed Clitus the Black, the man who had saved his life during battle, in a drunken altercation which caused Alexander tremendous amounts of emotional damage. Alexander then pushed into India. This would prove to be his toughest challenge yet. After some early success, he fought against the regional king named Porus in Punjab at the bloody Battle of the Hydaspes. Porus proved to be a formidable enemy commander. However, Alexander's army was still victorious, and being so impressed with King Porus, Alexander let him continue to rule Punjab as a subordinate ruler. This battle shook Alexander's army to the core though, being the most costly battle that Alexander ever fought due to Porus's fierce war elephants and determination. Alexander's army, many of whom were very homesick, tired, and extremely anxious about rumors they had heard about huge Indian armies further east, some of which being 5 times larger than their own army, started to mutiny as his men refused to march further east. This gave Alexander no choice but to turn back, but he didn't want to go back the way he came as he thought that would make him look like he was defeated. Instead, he moved his army south into Malian territory, winning more minor victories, but soon he faced the main Malian army which had withdrawn into Multan. After easily taking the outer parts of the city, Alexander besieged the inner city. Frustrated by how long it was taking, he scaled a ladder which broke behind him, leaving him fighting alongside only a few other of his soldiers. Alexander attacked and killed the Malian leader, but was then shot in the chest by an arrow. His soldiers had rushed up the wall to help their king, and soon the siege was over, with Alexander hovering between life and death from the serious wound he had received. However, he soon recovered, and his conquest of the Malian territory was complete. He then sent parts of his army through Carmania with General Craterus, while he led the majority of the army through the Gedrosian desert, trying to prove how much better he was than Cyrus the Great, who lost his army in the desert. His fleets under Nearchus took the last part of his army on the boats home, exploring the Persian Gulf at the same time. Many consider marching through the Gedrosian desert to be Alexander's biggest mistake, as he lost 25,000 of his men going through such a difficult desert. But some believe that Alexander did this on purpose to punish his men for refusing to keep marching east. On his return to Persepolis, Alexander did a purge of many officials and governors who had misbehaved in his absence. He then carried on to Susa, where he performed a mass marriage between Persian noblewomen and his senior officers, although many of these marriages were short. Alexander also married 2 Persian princesses. He also paid off all his soldiers' debts and announced that all overaged and disabled veterans would be sent home, but not before holding a great banquet for several thousand of his men, at which they all ate together. Next, he traveled to Ecbatana to retrieve the bulk of the Persian treasure. His closest friend and lover, Hephaestion, also died there of an apparent fever or poisoning. This devastated Alexander and left him grief-stricken as he headed back to Babylon. There he made plans to move south into Arabia, but this would never come to be, as Alexander died in Babylon at age 32 from a fever due to drinking unmixed wine, or from being poisoned by the plant white hellebore being mixed into his wine. Others have suggested that he might have died of natural causes such as malaria, typhoid fever, or from years of wounds and heavy drinking, compounded by the anguish he felt at the passing of his lover, Hephaestion. Alexander left no clear successor, only declaring that his empire should go to the strongest, which ended with the division of his empire. We will cover all of the successors to Alexander in upcoming videos, starting with Ptolemy. Alexander the Great is one of my favorite historical figures and is considered one of the best generals in history. The fact that he never lost a single battle is astonishing. He was also very emotional and ruled with an iron fist, but I still find his determination very inspiring. I hope you've enjoyed my first history video. Let me know what you think about Alexander the Great in the comments section down below, and please subscribe to show your support. I'll see you all next time.